Have you ever looked into a woman's eyes and felt something ancient looking back? Not love, not kindness, but something unnameable. A flicker of cruelty behind affection. A hunger beneath the softness. Something that wanted you, but it also wanted to undo you. Sigmund Freud saw it. He didn't hear it in lectures. He didn't read it in books. He watched it unfold in his office behind velvet curtains under the pretense of therapy. And what he found terrified him, not because it was evil, but because it was true. Women, he realized, don't even understand what they desire, because it comes from somewhere. But then came the cases. Women, upper class, married, respectable, who confessed to fantasies of being overpowered, humiliated, broken. Not with shame, but with shaking hands and burning eyes. Anna von Lebanon, Dora, Cecilia M. They came to him with hysteria, but their bodies told a different story. Behind their fainting, coughing, numbness was one unbearable truth. They desired what society said they must never want. Control, domination, power games, even destruction if it meant feeling something real. Freud tried to publish these findings. He was laughed out of academic circles, labeled obscene, exiled from the very community he helped create. Why? Because what he uncovered shattered the polite illusions of Western society. That women are pure, that their desires are simple, that love is enough. It's not. Freud discovered something darker. That female desire is chaotic, conflicted, and dangerously drawn to power. Not the kind that comforts, but the kind that threatens. It's why the gentle man gets ignored and the dangerous man gets remembered. It's why she says, "I want honesty," but her body flinches when you show weakness. It's why she leaves the man who adores her and obsesses over the one who doesn't care. Because underneath her smile, underneath her reason, underneath everything she believes she wants is the unconscious. And the unconscious does not lie. It craves polarity. It craves danger. It craves the collapse of control so that something else can emerge. Freud didn't want to believe it, but he couldn't deny it. So he buried it between the lines of his books, in private letters, in case studies that no one was supposed to read. But now you will, because once you understand what he saw, you will never look at female desire the same way again. This isn't about blaming women. It's about seeing them not as angels, not as victims, but as human with depths most men were never warned about. And if you keep chasing love with your eyes closed, you'll pay for it with your soul. Let's begin. She was one of Freud's first patients, Anna von Lebanon, a wealthy Viennese woman, educated, respected, wife, mother, socialite. On the surface, she had everything. But underneath, she was falling apart. Her body rebelled. Seizures, fainting spells, random paralysis, sudden outbursts of laughter or tears with no cause. No one could explain it. Doctors called it female hysteria, a polite way of saying they had no idea. But Freud watched, listened, dug deeper, and when Anna finally spoke, what came out shattered his entire belief system. She didn't want healing. She didn't want peace. She didn't even want love. She wanted to feel something violent. She confessed in fragmented words between trembling fits that she dreamed of being overpowered, not comforted, not adored, but crushed under the weight of a man's presence. Not just physically, psychologically. She described shameful thoughts of submission, of humiliation, of being owned, claimed, not gently, but brutally. These weren't memories. They were desires, and they terrified her because they weren't rational. They weren't moral. They weren't hers, or so she thought. They came from somewhere else. Freud called it the unconscious. But what it really was the shadow of female desire. Not the fantasy women are told to have, the fairy tale, the protector, the gentle caress, but the fantasy no one dares to speak. To be overwhelmed, to be dominated, to be consumed. Freud was horrified, not because it was rare, but because after Anna, he saw it everywhere, in Dora, in Cecilia, in countless women who walked into his study wrapped in propriety, only to unravel under the weight of their own impulses. And what terrified him most was that society created this repression. The more civilized the woman, the more violently her unconscious rebelled. Behind the corsets, the manners, the moral sermons, lurked a craving for chaos, not because women are broken, but because their desires had no room to breathe. So they leaked out as hysteria, as illness, as mental collapse. Freud realized something chilling. What a woman consciously wants is often the opposite of what she unconsciously craves. Anna said she wanted tenderness, but her symptoms screamed for domination. She said she wanted peace, but her body longed for upheaval. This was more than one patient. It was a pattern, a secret woven into the fabric of femininity itself. And most men will, because in her shadow, desire wears a darker face. Freud uncovered something most men today still refuse to believe. That in many women, not all, but more than you think, desire doesn't begin with closeness. It begins with resistance. He called it the eroticization of refusal, and it left him disturbed, because it meant what men had been taught to do, be respectful, open, available, was often the opposite of what stirred her deep desire. You want her? You express it clearly, kindly, directly. But then she pulls away suddenly, cold, vague, distant. You didn't do anything wrong. That's the problem. Because deep in her psyche, arousal isn't always about being desired. It's about being pursued, overwhelmed, taken. Not by force, but by intensity. And that intensity only ignites when there's conflict. Freud saw it over and over. A woman says no, not because she doesn't want it, but because she wants to feel the tension, the psychological heat of being pursued despite herself. It's not about consent. This isn't a green light for disrespect. It's about understanding what her unconscious responds to. The chase, the dominance, the man who doesn't ask permission but commands attention. Freud noticed something chilling in his female patients. They fantasized about men who didn't wait for clarity. They obsessed over men who didn't need affirmation to act. Men who stirred something inside them by disrupting their emotional equilibrium. A soft no, followed by a long stare. A protest racked in flirtation, a rejection that secretly hoped to be overturned. To Freud, this was psychosexual contradiction. Desire not as alignment, but as friction. Because for many women, arousal is tied to surrender. And surrender can only exist where there's resistance. Which means her no must first exist so that her yes can feel real. It sounds insane, and to most men it is. But this is the world Freud saw. The unconscious isn't polite. It isn't consistent. It doesn't care about logic. It cares about feeling. So while men chase clarity, women chase intensity. And when she feels nothing, she leaves. Not because you're wrong, but because you're safe. You thought you were showing her love. She felt nothing. You listened, waited, respected her pace, and that's exactly why she stopped responding. Because you weren't dangerous, you weren't disrupting her rhythm, you weren't stirring the shadow. Freud wrote, "A woman often finds satisfaction only where resistance has been offered, either from without or from within." Do you understand what that means? It means she needs the tension to feel alive, the push and pull, the spark of doubt, the uncertainty of your dominance. That's why the men she chases aren't always the kindest, but the ones who shake her emotional foundation, who interrupt her certainty, who don't flinch when she tests, who remain calm when she storms. She says she wants softness, but she feels aroused by strength, and that strength has to show up in the face of her no. If you can't handle that contradiction, you will never understand her desire. Because deep down, she doesn't want control. She wants to lose it. She looks composed, educated, polite, charming. She knows the right things to say. She knows how to blush at compliments, how to speak softly, how to appear pure. But Freud saw through it, and what he found terrified him, because the civilized woman isn't who she really is. It's a mask, a persona sculpted by society, religion, and repression. And under that mask is chaos, primal, instinctive, sexual, dark. Freud wrote that culture forces women into a performance. They must appear gentle, innocent, restrained, but this performance doesn't erase their instincts. It buries them alive, and what's buried always returns. Not in words, not in reason, but in behavior, in contradiction, in emotional sabotage, in the strange ways she destroys what she says she wants. This is why so many men are confused. She says, "I want a nice guy." She marries him, then cheats on him with the man who makes her feel something real. Why? Because the mask was never hers. It was given to her. She wears it to be accepted, to survive, to be praised as a good woman. But deep down, she resents it. Freud believed that repression creates neurosis, a split between the conscious self, what she thinks she should want, and the unconscious self, what she actually craves. And the more she denies it, the more violent the return. The civilized woman becomes emotionally unstable. Not because she's broken, but because she's lying to herself. She can't say what she truly wants, so it leaks out sideways through drama, through sudden mood shifts, through self-sabotage in her relationships. She punishes the man who gives her peace. She withholds from the man who gives her stability. She confuses vulnerability with weakness and desire with danger. Freud documented this in case after case. Women who said one thing but unconsciously acted out another. They would plead for safety, then run into the arms of risk. They would cry over betrayal, then recreate it again and again. Because the mask of the good woman was never a reflection of her soul. It was armor, and armor doesn't feel. This is what most men don't understand. When you fall for the mask, you're not loving her. You're loving the idea she was forced to wear. And one day, she'll shatter it. Maybe in rage, maybe in boredom, maybe in silence. But she will turn on the image she crafted. And if you believed in that image, she will turn on you because you didn't see her. Not really. Not the animal underneath the etiquette. Not the hunger beneath the politeness. Freud saw that once a woman's desires are repressed long enough, they become dangerous, not just to her, but to every man who gets close. Because when her mask begins to crack, she doesn't become free. She becomes unpredictable. And in that chaos, most men lose themselves. Of all Freud's theories, this was the one they tried hardest to erase. Penis envy. Not because it was ridiculous, but because it was too accurate, too insulting, too revealing. Freud wasn't talking about anatomy. He was talking about power. The male body, in its symbolic form, represented freedom, strength, assertion, the ability to act in the world without apology. And the female child, Freud claimed, upon discovering she does not possess this form, feels a deep wound, not just physical, but psychological, existential. She realizes she lacks something, not just a body part, but the authority that comes with it, the power to penetrate the world, to dominate, to leave an imprint. And that absence fears. Freud called it envy. Modern feminists call it blasphemy. But every man who's ever been in a relationship with a deeply controlling woman knows this energy. She doesn't want equality. She wants advantage. She wants the final word, the upper hand, the frame. Freud observed that this envy often transformed not into a desire for the male body, but into a craving to possess its function, to dominate men, to belittle them, to psychologically cut what she could not physically own. This is why some women don't just leave a man. They emasculate him first. Why? because control becomes compensation. She doesn't want his love. She wants his position. And here's where it gets darker. Freud believed that women who could not resolve this envy, who could not come to peace with their difference, would unconsciously work to steal what they could never be. Not through strength, not through merit, but through manipulation. The guilt trip, the silent treatment, the withdrawal of intimacy, the tears used like daggers. Because if she can't dominate you physically, she'll dominate you emotionally. You'll kneel without knowing you're on your knees. You'll apologize without knowing what you did. You'll surrender, thinking it's love, but it isn't. It's power imbalance dressed up as devotion. Freud warned that unless a woman matures past this envy, she will remain psychologically fixated on the man's authority. Not to admire it, but to own it. And the tragedy, most men are never told this is happening. They think they're just supporting her, just being a good partner, just giving her space. But slowly the polarity dies. The desire dies. The man dies. Because he was never the man. He was a placeholder, a symbol, and she was trying to conquer it. Freud knew this would be hated. He wrote it anyway because he saw what others refused to see. That some women don't want a king to love. They want a king to dethrone. Not because they hate men, but because they're still trying to resolve what they never received. And until that inner wound is healed, every man she meets becomes the battlefield. Freud said it plainly, though few wanted to hear it. The truth of a woman's desire is not revealed in her words, but in her fantasies. And those fantasies, when stripped bare, are not always sweet. They are not polite. They are not empowering in the modern sense. They are more often than not about power, not possessing it, but surrendering to it. Behind closed doors, far from the performance of public virtue, many women crave not equality, but dominance, not comfort, but chaos. Freud discovered this through confession. After confession, women in his practice spoke of dreams where they were taken, overpowered, claimed, not with cruelty, but with force, with intensity, with the certainty of a man who does not ask, but leads. These fantasies were not the outliers. They were common, more common than most dare admit. But here's the paradox. In life, she wants control. In fantasy, she wants to lose it. In public, she demands respect. In private, she craves ravishment. This isn't hypocrisy. It's the fracture Freud uncovered. The split between the ego and the id. The conscious woman, shaped by culture and shame, wants to appear composed. But the unconscious woman wants to be undone. And so she tests. She challenges. She creates friction even when there's peace. Because deep down she's asking a question. Can you contain me? Can you handle my chaos? Can you break through my defenses without asking permission? Most men fail this test, not because they're weak, but because they've been trained to fear their own dominance, to apologize for being assertive, to overthink, to hesitate, to seek approval before taking the lead. And so the polarity collapses. She's left with a man who is soft when she needed steel. And even though he's kind, attentive, and respectful, her body does not respond. Why? Because the part of her that desires is not interested in being warped. It wants to be claimed. This is the dark current running beneath so many modern relationships. The man thinks he's being a good partner, but the woman feels empty, unseen, unpenetrated, emotionally, spiritually, and sexually. And so resentment builds. Attraction dies. She pulls away. He tries harder. She despises him for it. Freud saw this again and again. That true erotic charge is not born from equality, but from difference, from polarity, from tension, from the dance of surrender and command. And when that is suppressed, when men are neutered and women are told to fear their own longing, something far worse takes its place. Manipulation, passive aggression, performative intimacy. The bedroom becomes a stage, the passion becomes a script, and both partners begin to die inside because the truth was never faced. that some women do not want a gentle listener. They want a sovereign storm, not to harm them, but to reawaken them. And if you as a man are too afraid of your own fire, you'll never light hers. By now you felt it, that creeping realization, the chill that runs through your spine when something ancient and painfully true is finally named. You weren't crazy, you weren't overreacting, and you weren't alone. You just never had the language, because no one wanted you to know what Freud actually discovered, what he heard in the confessions, what he decoded behind the dreams, the symptoms, the stars that lasted too long. He saw a truth the world still isn't ready to face. That female desire is not innocent. It is not passive. It is not predictable. It is layered with control, submission, resentment, hunger, contradiction, and deep unconscious motives. Freud saw women who destroyed the very men they loved, not because they were evil, but because their longing was never clean. It was tangled in envy, twisted by shame, and fueled by a need to balance the power they never had. But here's where this turns back on you. Most men today walk straight into, but that was the lie, a dangerous lie, one that cost men their clarity, their confidence, and their center. The real prize is sovereignty, direction, calm, grounded masculine presence, the ability to say, I see you, I want you, but I don't need you. Because the moment you start needing her more than you need your mission, you become replaceable. Forget the flowers. Forget the grand gestures. Forget the desperate attempts to decode her mood swings and win her back. That was never what kept her. What keeps her, what tests her, is whether she can shake you, whether you flinch when she cries, whether you beg when she's cold, whether you trade your truth just to avoid her storm. Because if you do, she knows you're not the man. You're a mirror reflecting what she already fears in herself. Insecurity, instability, dependence. Freud's gift to you, if you're willing to take it, isn't just theory. It's a torch, a light into the unconscious patterns that destroy modern men silently. Patterns of emotional slavery disguised as love, of control masked as intimacy, of surrender dressed as support. You are not here to be her therapist. You are not here to be her savior. And you are not here to mold yourself into whatever shape wins her validation. You are here to remember that you were the mountain, that she came to feel your stillness, not to shake it. And if she walks away when you stop performing, good, let her, because she was never the throne. She was the mirror that revealed whether you've forgotten your crown. And when you stop chasing, when you stop proving, when you return to your axis, she will either rise to meet you or fade from your story. Either way, you win because you finally remembered who the prize really was. If this spoke to something you felt but never said, don't let it fade.